Thank you, Sri. And next up, we have a dear friend all the way from Singapore. Again, this morning, we're kind of looking at the global AI space as well. Neeraj Aggarwal is our next speaker, and he's going to be talking about the state of AI in India. But why BCG, why Neeraj? Neeraj has worked with us at Indiaspora for the last 2 years in getting reports done on the diaspora's impact on the United States. This is a report that's probably been quoted, 10,000 times or more. And he's also done a report with us on the impact of the diaspora on the UAE. We've worked with BCG many times when I did my enterprise conference and other events to really be the expert we go to really look at AI. But we wanted Neeraj to come here and really talk about the state of AI in India. Neeraj is a partner, works out of Singapore at BCG, but he also has responsibility for Asia Pacific. So Neeraj, please welcome.
There you are. Thanks. Sure. All right, that's a hard act to follow after Ray. So I'm going to start with how many of you heard about 4 blind men and an elephant parable? Any hands? Yeah, I think so one of the things I remember about that is many people touch the elephant. Somebody's touching the leg, somebody's touching the trunk, or et cetera, et cetera. And somebody says it's a tree, somebody says it's a rope. You get the flavor where I'm going with this. I think AI is on a stage of enormous change. And anybody, at least I for one, start by saying that anybody who claims they know about this subject is likely going to be wrong, right? I mean, I just want to start by saying that and put that caveat out there. The second thing I want to tell you is a story which goes back, a real thing, 2015 in Bangalore. I remember Vishal Sikka had taken over as CEO at Infosys, and he was having an analyst meet, I think one of his first ones. And that time, digital transformation was becoming very popular. And one of the analysts asked him, how much of Infosys business is digital? And different companies at that time, TCS, others, had a percentage ascribed to it. He gave a very quirky answer, which I thought was very interesting. He said, last I checked, we were not doing any analog business. All our business was digital. So I just say this in jest, partly to tell you that when in times of enormous change, there are some new parameters which come in play, and they sometimes are half-truths. Yeah? So I want to start by that. But overall, I want to give you a more centered view on perhaps what I see as the state of play for AI in India, and I'm going to cover 3 aspects. Let's see if this works. I'm going to talk about the foundational play. Where is India positioned vis-a-vis other countries? I want to talk about sentiment, and I want to talk about opportunity. And I think the reason I do this is because I feel that hopefully gives you a more holistic view of the state of AI in the country. So let's start with foundation. Let's see if I get this. Yeah. So the big question we always have is, we know what's happening in the US, we know what's happening in China, and there's always a question mark about, are we at scale? Can we compete? Right? So in AI in US, we roughly know the template. It's market-driven, it's private sector led, but it's also deeply government-backed because government is a big buyer of AI services. A lot of those companies you see, actually some of the first customers often have been government at fairly reasonable prices, which allow the cash to flow in and allow innovation to happen. China was very different. China made a push in AI probably about 15 years ago when they got some of the smartest Chinese to move back to China, and they had this plan about getting anybody who was at least the top 100 brains back to the country and made a concerted push over a decade, and that is now beginning to pay results. I think against that backdrop, what is India doing? My view is we are market-driven, but the good news is we are genuinely state-supported. I think huge kudos to the India AI Summit recently. It's genuinely created a buzz about AI in the country, but it's also industry-led, as is often the case. And it's an open market. It's not a walled garden like China is. It's an open market where anybody can come in and play. I think the work done by India AI mission is fantastic. The work on the sovereign AI stack is genuinely leading results. We have unique issues, we have a voice-first market, our data sets are unique, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to show you the next chart, which is a bit geekish, but hopefully I think it's important to put this in play. AI is going to be a decadal opportunity, okay? And so I want to show you 3 things. One is applications, second is models, and the third thing is what I call infrastructure. All these things together combine to make what AI clicks, okay? And on each one of them, there will be multiple what I call S-curves. S-curve is, the reason S-curve is important is initially anything starts slow, then there's a big period when it really takes off, and then it plateaus. But then it moves on to another S-curve. That's how the world of innovation has always happened. So what you see on this page is multiple S-curves happening in applications, some in the model space, and some in the infrastructure space. The big question is, where is the world, and where is the AI in India on this? So I drew this chart last year exactly the same time. So what you see, the triangle is India at that time, and the rhombus is where the world was on each of these. And I tried to take a stab at putting the same literally now, according to my view, on where we stack up. So what you'll notice, if I start possibly from maybe apps downwards to models and to infra, on the app side, I think there's a lot of, you saw the 100 startups out of India, which were just presented by Akrit and others. And that space is evolving rapidly. I do think with the injection of money that they talked about, $3 billion, etc., that there is momentum. Certainly, we are not at the cutting and the bleeding edge of what is happening in Silicon Valley, but I'm more energized by the possibilities here than I was till last year. So I feel positive about it. On the models, certainly a big shift forward. I think the scaling laws are, the bigger is not necessarily always better. There is certainly the frontier models are ahead of the models out of India. They're probably, to my mind, 12 to 18 months, maybe 12 to 15 months ahead. But particularly the show that Sarvam put up at India AI Summit with their 100 billion plus model, specifically on unique things like text to speech, and speech to text, on document reading and writing, on Samvad, which is real-time translation, and many more things, was very exciting. And there are many more in the play. Bharat Gen is another one which is coming up, and many more. So I do feel for many use cases, we are getting to at least a pretty reasonable level of performance with some of those models. And these models are open source as well. These are not closed source. So that, I think, is a big use case, and they use a mixture of experts approach. The last one is also interesting. Our infrastructure. India consumes about 20% of data in the world, but our data centers are roughly 3%. So we are far more loaded on that capacity than we need today. And that needs to change. And thankfully, there's a lot of money coming in because people see the opportunity, but that's going to be a big build in the times to come. So these are three things I just wanted to ground you on where I see India on each of these important parameters. Now, let's go further, which is to the next part, which is really about sentiment. So, and sentiment, I look at two ways. What are consumers saying and what are enterprises saying? Anything you want to do, ultimately, these two are the biggest custodians of where money goes, right? And they determine what is happening. So let's look at consumers first. So the good news is Indian consumers are very bullish about AI. You know, this is a chart, which is a very recent one. Google put it out there. There's similar ones by various sources. I think Anthropic had one as well. Generally, the consumer excitement about AI in India is higher than many other countries. It could be because of young demographics. This is driven by how many people have used a chatbot or some other use of sources. This is good news, to be very honest. This is good news for innovators. This is good news for employers that our people are willing to embrace new technology. Okay? But the second one is very important, which is enterprises. And let me show you this. Now, this is a somewhat complex chart. I want to explain this to you for a minute. This is a study which, as BCG, we did. Because if you ever want to find out the enterprise space, there's too much confusion. So we did this effort to say, what's the spectrum of play out there? And this is roughly what you see on the screen is 1,250 companies. 1,250 companies across the world. These are across industries, all kinds of industries. These are big companies, medium-sized companies, small companies. So $50 billion plus, dollars plus, or $1 billion and below. About 100 of these companies out of 1,250 are Indian companies. So now, a few things to highlight. Number one, if you see, in spite of all the thing, and Ray, in spite of what you said, there's really only 5% companies which I today say are genuinely AI future built. What was the number last year? The same number a year back was 4%. So enterprise diffusion takes a long time. And there's a large number of companies which are still stagnating, which are or AI nascent or emerging. But it is changing. So the average is moving, and it is changing, and this is a big year. I think the shift to the right will happen in a big way this year. What I find encouraging is if I drew the 100 Indian companies, they will roughly fall in a similar distribution. So we're neither ahead but not behind. And if you roll the clock back to digital transformation, typically I would have said Indian companies are about 18 months behind on the change. So in this wave, what I find exciting is the big action is happening in US, in India, in China among enterprise companies. Europe is certainly behind these places. And that creates a lot of opportunity for India to take the lead, for Indian entrepreneurs to take the lead in this wave. And that, to me, is genuinely what I feel energized about. Because if you did not have this fuel, innovation cannot happen. So that's another thing I want to level set with. Now, let's go to the next part, which is the most important. I'll skip this slide, which is really about where is the opportunity. And I want to break this into 3 important questions. One big question which everybody asks, what is going to happen to the Indian IT industry? It's employees, IT, GCC, all of that put together. It's probably 10 million plus people, and you add the ancillary, it's multiple. It's very, very integral part of our GDP, right? So what's going to happen there? I'm going to provide some pointers. I don't think it's a hard one to answer full on. I think there are some unique places which allow India to leapfrog with AI and solve India's specific challenges. Think healthcare, think education, probably even think agriculture, and many more. And then there are many places where new industries are getting created. And these are trillions of dollars of industries. And what's our play going to be? So those are 3 things I want to go through. So let's talk about Indian IT industry first. Okay. Just a simple schematic. If you see the left-hand side, is how the industry has been possibly, to my mind, over the last decade. So they have been good at defending and growing what they're already good at, and they have every year adapted to new technology, whatever the flavor of the day has been. If it's been Salesforce, if it's been Workday, or if it's been whatever, digital in the past. But the ratio of the industry was probably 85% in the good zone and 10 to 15% in the new zone. And that combination has got this industry going, and it's been a phenomenal outperformer. I think exactly to what Ray pointed out, something very fundamental is happening in this industry. And whether you take the 10x that he mentioned or other multiples, I think 10x employees are getting created, and at its best, there's tons happening. So where will this go? But before that, I want to point out a few things. If you look at these companies serve all the enterprises in the world. If you take an average enterprise and their spend on tech, it is increasing. So if I'm a bank, and in the past I used to spend 8% or 9% of my revenue on tech, chances are in the next 2 to 3 years that 8-9% is going to grow to 10, 12, 13%. So there is a sizable increase in amount of money I'm spending on tech. Second, you go to any enterprise, they have more unsolved problems with tech than solved problems with tech. So what I mean is every year the tech organization is told in the enterprises, prioritize what you can solve because you cannot solve everything. So they carry a lot of what they call tech debt. Yeah? And there is tech debt in these companies. So you have spend increasing, you have tech debt which is out there. So that allows the opportunity space to go further. At the same time, there is productivity increasing. Hugely increasing in some spaces, slightly increasing in some others. So what will happen with that wave is the classical business, which is the dark green, is going to get shrunk. Right? You can do it more efficiently with lesser number of people. There is going to be newer opportunities with tech, which I talked about. Right? I mean, that business in the lighter green is going to expand. The bigger question for the companies is, can they go beyond? Are there newer businesses they can go? Can you become the compliance provider of tomorrow? Can you go after? Historically, the IT service industry was subservient to the SaaS industry. So a company will say, I have 20,000 Salesforce engineers, I have 5,000 Workday trained people, I have XYZ SAP trained professionals. I do not know necessarily that it will exactly be this stack order. It could be a mixed bag. So I would put all those expense. See, enterprise is going to still spend on services. So I feel there's a big churn out there on the pecking order, on who is master, who is, if I may, who is kind of on the top of the pecking order, who is below. And that spend is going to get reoriented. But this does mean there will be some true winners and there will be some real losers. So staying status quo-ish is not going to work. The best players who adapt, as always, who build, when winds are blowing, you need to build windmills, and they will make more money out of it. And some others are going to face some challenges and may get acquired and all of those usual things. So it's a big wave. So I think that's one thing I wanted to put out there. The next one. Now, I want to just draw a parallel from the healthcare industry. What you see on the screen is on the x-axis is the spend per capita on healthcare today. US spends 16% of its GDP on healthcare. India spends between 2 to 3% of its GDP on healthcare. And our GDP per person is lower. So not surprisingly, the Indian per capita spend on healthcare is far lower than an American. But the y-axis is the life expectancy. I think this provides a one-time opportunity for us not to take the path of what some of the other countries which have built it in the past, but India could genuinely leapfrog, get the 10x multipliers going on the scarce resources, on the doctors, the very best doctors which are in scarce supply, on the doctor, and historically I've always talked about this iron triangle of access, affordability, and quality. So I always used to say you can pick 2 out of 3 things. So if you get great access and great affordability, chances are the quality is dubious. If you get great quality and great affordability, maybe the access is not easy. So you could always pick 2, but I think AI creates a once in a multi-decade opportunity to have all of them available to you. That being said, just because AI is there, you cannot imagine these things will get solved. There's some real work needed to reimagine business models, and that is the hard work. Because the big problem in India is both in primary care and in tertiary care. Primary care is a tough business to make money on. So somebody needs to really rethink the business model and really think, some of the hardest things. So I was meeting the Meesho founder yesterday, and when they created Meesho, he said nobody believed in the business. Everybody said it's a terrible idea. But now they have IPO'd and they've built something. They still have to make the economics work better, but it's IPO and it's done remarkable. I think something similar could happen where something profound could be done in this space. And then you can imagine this in the education and other spaces. So this is one place I feel deeply excited about. I want to go further to the third point, which is new age industries. Robotics will be, over a period of time, a $10 trillion industry. A $10 trillion industry. It's possibly less than $1 trillion today. Certainly less than $1 trillion today. Who will be the winners of tomorrow? US, China, India. These are just some examples of companies from India. I picked a few which are doing some interesting stuff. Origin is in construction robotics. Adverb is a company out of Noida, one for Noida, given the Bangalore-Hyderabad debate, which is very exciting. Defense, you just have to read the news headlines to realize that defense as a spend of GDP is going to grow up many, many fold. And we need our own answers and, and also shape it for probably a large part of the world. Drug discovery. Huge possibilities, not just on cancer, but so many unsolved drugs. Any multiple pathways, metabolic, neurodegenerative, etc., etc. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, huge possibilities there. And just technology itself. There are new technology companies. We talked about Cursor, Lovable, all of those things. There's going to be a huge new technology sort of industry. So in each one of them, each of these is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And each one of them, India has a one-time opportunity to punch above its weight historically. And that's what is exciting, but that's what also is the hard work. So in summary, I think India's playbook will be, AI playbook, will be built on 3 pillars. We have the foundation for frugal decentralized innovation, which is good news. The positive sentiment is very helpful and needs to be channelized for execution at scale. And our big opportunity lies in both reinvention and leapfrogging. These are, that's how I think about the AI world of today. As I said earlier, it's rapidly changing. But before I end, and the next one is my last slide, there is one other thing which is important to call out in the world of AI, which I think is a big unknown. India roughly every year has between 20 to 25 million people who come into working age population. That's a very sizable workforce, yeah? And if you look at this 2x2, you can't have a BCG presentation without no 2x2s. You have 2 things. One is how many people have agency, which is meaning that they control their own destiny in some sense, and how many jobs are under transition risk. So if you read this, firstly, everybody needs to change, irrespective of where you are. Everybody needs to change their own operating model. But if you're on the top left, which is number one, if you have high agency and you are not facing so much transition risk, AI can be a great thing because it can allow you to have amplified outcomes. You'll be delighted. On the top right, you can have high agency, but your job is replaceable. So value can shift out of your job. That you need to figure out how do you reskill yourself. The one to worry about is the bottom right the most. This is what I call the Turing trap. This is where AI is supposed to be helping you, but also can dull your capability. Think how many of us before Google Maps had direction capability and have completely abdicated direction as a skill which almost do not think about, right? It's something which we completely go to technology. I think technology will make many things easier, but it also makes an important question about people with low agency and jobs with a high transition risk. What does it mean for them? So I also feel India both has a need and a responsibility to lead this dialogue for the global south, if not for the entire world, on what does it mean for human flourishing in the age of AI. And the answers are non-obvious, but the answers need to come, and India needs to play a seminal role on this. So hopefully this gives you a bit of a bird's eye view and a bit of the part of the elephant, whether it was the trunk or the leg, I don't know, but thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much. That was terrific. Really appreciate it. Two things I want to reflect on. One, you did something that AI will not do. You said, we don't know. You were willing to say, I don't know. You ended with the big unknown. So let's talk about jobs for a minute. I'm looking at a report here. Indian Express says that less than 7% of male Indian graduates are finding a permanent salaried job within a year. Stats in the US, you saw schools, even big schools, Harvard Business School, some big percentage of students aren't getting jobs, and other places also. And this is before the AI revolution, right? So what can you tell us about jobs? Where do we go from here? And that path to the middle class, and people who are in the middle class already, where do they go?
It's a difficult question, as I said. It's part of the big unknown. So I think if I look at from the enterprise part of view, they feel a big responsibility to the people who are already within the enterprises. So what levers do they have? They try to retrain their own people. And the other lever they have is, can I reduce my hiring? Because I feel moral obligation to people who are already on board than to the people who are yet to come on board. So that's an important skill. And if everybody gets expertise easily, for example, in any organization, the first 2 years are normally when you get trained to become better at the job, and then you contribute. So who is taking responsibility for the first early years, because that skill gets commoditized now? There's no easy answers to that. But irrespective, I think, the future of tomorrow, I think there are two things which I could still call out. Judgment and taste, I think, will remain hugely relevant. So people who have a breadth of learning. So if you're in school, I think both breadth and depth. I think a combination. I'm not, I would strongly argue for breadth being very important. So have a breadth, because you need people who are orchestrators, who can take various different inputs and still put it together. The other one I would possibly still say is what I call zigzaggers. I think we'll have much more zigzaggers. You'll have one kind of experience. You will not do one job for a long period of time. You'll do one skill set. You may move on to another skill set. So, but tough question, no easy answers.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, Neeraj from BCG.